It always starts the same way. The clock hits midnight, the air hums with the flicker of old fluorescent lights, and somewhere, a bell rings when no one's there to ring it. A hotel clerk swears a man checked in, but the system says he never existed. A young woman behind a gas station counter finds Polaroids of herself left by a man who somehow knows her handwriting. A parking lot fills with cars that have no plates, engines running, headlights off watching, and beneath a front desk, a pale hand slowly crawls up to press the service bell. If you've ever worked the night shift, you know how the world feels different after midnight. Quieter, emptier, wrong. Sometimes the only thing staring back at you from the dark isn't your reflection. Welcome to *** Midnight Nocturne, ***, where every story begins when everyone else is asleep. So lock your doors, check your mirrors, and don't look away when you hear that sound, because tonight, * someone times might be watching you too. Subscribe, if you dare. I used to think working the night shift at a small hotel was easy money. It was quiet, predictable, and empty enough that I could sit behind the front desk, scroll on my phone, and pretend I was the only person awake in the world. But after what happened last year, I can't walk into that lobby without feeling like someone's still there, waiting for me to notice them again. The hotel was small, 3 floors, maybe 40 rooms total. Most nights, only a handful were booked. I worked from 10 p.m. until 6 a.m. Long stretches of silence, broken only by the hum of the vending machine and the click of the heater. The lobby was cozy, but old, with couches facing a television that never stayed on for long and a front door that locked automatically after midnight. Guests had to buzz to be let in, and I'd press the release button from the desk. It made me feel safe. I thought that meant I was in control. That night started like any other. At 11 p.m., a man buzzed at the door. I let him in without thinking twice. He looked mid-40s, tall but a little gaunt, with a baseball cap shadowing his face and a small backpack slung over one shoulder. His voice was calm, almost flat, when he asked for a room. I quoted him the rate. He nodded, handed over a card. It swiped fine, beeped like it went through, so I gave him the key to room 214. But when I looked up, he was still watching me, just standing there, his expression empty, his eyes holding mine too long. 4 seconds, maybe 5, long enough that my stomach tightened. Then he turned and disappeared down the hallway.
Can anyone hear me?
I remember telling myself not to overthink it. People act weird all the time when they're tired or traveling. But around midnight, I looked up from my phone and saw him again back in the lobby, sitting on one of the couches. He wasn't watching TV. The screen was off. He was just sitting there, staring at it like he was waiting for something to start. I told myself he couldn't sleep, maybe just restless. Half an hour passed. He didn't move. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't reading. He wasn't even blinking much. It was as if he was conserving energy for something else. When I got up to grab water from the vending machine, I felt his gaze follow me the entire time. My skin prickled. I didn't look at him directly, but I could feel his eyes tracking every step. When I sat back down behind the desk, I checked the occupancy system out of habit. That's when I noticed something that made my heart stop. Room 214 was listed as vacant. No check-in, no payment, no log entry, nothing. I refreshed the page, checked the transaction record, still nothing. I called the room out of sheer disbelief, but no one answered. According to the keycard records, that door hadn't been opened all night, which meant the man never went there. I looked up. He was still in the lounge, still facing the dark TV. The silence in that lobby started to feel alive. Every sound seemed magnified. The buzz of the lights, the hum of the soda machine, even the faint ticking of the clock behind me. I kept telling myself it was a glitch, some kind of system error, but there was no way around the fact that he shouldn't have been there. At 1:30, I finally gathered the courage to approach him. "Everything okay, sir?" I asked. He turned his head toward me slowly, no emotion in his face, and said, "I couldn't sleep." His voice was low, almost bored. Then he turned back to the TV.
This is an emergency.
I nodded, pretending to be calm, but my hands were shaking when I walked back behind the desk. By 2 a.m., he was gone from the couch. My heart sank. I scanned the lobby.
Hi there.
Empty.
I'm ready to begin.
Then I saw him standing at the far end of the hallway near the bathrooms, half in shadow, not moving, just standing there, watching. I picked up the phone and called my manager. She was groggy and told me to keep an eye on him, to call the police if he did anything threatening.
God.
But I already felt threatened. There's something about silence that makes danger feel louder. When I checked the security monitors, I saw him wandering the first floor hallway. He'd stop at the end, stand perfectly still for minutes, then move again. He disappeared into the stairwell and stayed there for a long time. Every time I looked up, he was in a different place near the vending machines, by the elevator, sometimes half hidden behind the lobby corner. He never spoke, just stared. I didn't know if he was studying me or waiting for me to come closer. Around 3:30, I called the non-emergency police line. I told them there was a man inside who wasn't registered and had been roaming for hours. They said they'd send someone. While I waited, I tried to act busy, typing nonsense on the computer. He had moved again. This time,
We just need to know
closer,
what
only
happened.
15 feet from the desk. His eyes never blinked. He didn't even look curious, just intent, like he was memorizing. And my face, every instinct screamed at me to get out. At 3:50, I heard the buzzer and nearly jumped out of my chair, hoping it was the cops. It wasn't. Just another late guest. I buzzed them in quickly, and as they passed, I noticed the man's head turn to follow them. His eyes traced their every step. It was predatory, calculated. A few minutes later, he was gone from the cameras again. I flipped through the feeds and saw him standing outside a guest's door on the first floor. Just standing there, head slightly tilted, like he was listening. That's when I called 911. The dispatcher told me to stay put. Officers were on the way. I watched the feed, paralyzed, as he stood there for what felt like forever, before slowly walking back to the lobby. He came right up to the counter this time and leaned over it.
There.
His breath smelled faintly metallic. He smiled slightly and asked, "Do you have any food?" His voice was soft, almost playful. I told him there were vending machines. He nodded, still smiling, and walked away. I don't think I breathed again until I saw flashing blue lights outside.
You always
When
work
the
this
officers
late?
came in, he was back on the couch, sitting perfectly still, waiting. They asked him questions, checked his ID, then they walked him out. One officer came back to tell me the truth. The card he gave me was stolen. He wasn't a guest. He had no bags, no ID, no reservation. He had been pretending the whole time just to get inside. They charged him with trespassing and credit card theft, and then they left. After they were gone, I sat in that chair until sunrise, staring at the empty lobby. Every time the air conditioner clicked on, I flinched. I kept checking the cameras, half expecting to see him standing just out of frame, still watching. I don't know what his plan was that night, but I know this: he wasn't there to sleep. And when you work the night shift long enough, you learn the truth. The scariest people are the ones who look like I belong there. My name is Meredith. I'm 24.
Sometimes it feels
And for the
good
last 2
just to
years,
breathe.
I've been working the overnight
and let
shift
go.
at a small gas station off County Road 11. One of those forgotten places that only show up when your tank hits empty or you take a wrong turn. I used to love the quiet, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the rhythmic beep of the door
2
chime,
a.m.
the smell of burnt coffee and old magazines. It felt safe, predictable. But now, every time that chime rings, I flinch, because I know what kind of people notice you when the rest of the world is asleep. It started on a Thursday, around 1 in the morning. The night was damp and still, the kind of silence where you can hear your own heartbeat. I was behind the counter, half asleep, about to microwave a cinnamon roll I didn't even want, when the bell chimed. A man walked in, mid-40s, maybe older. He had a green coat that looked too big, hair that was messy but clean, and eyes that seemed too awake for that hour. He didn't go for coffee, didn't browse the shelves. He just stood near the counter, staring. "Hi," I said, forcing a smile. He smiled back, small, polite. Then he asked, "You always work this late?" I hesitated.
Sorry.
"Yeah, mostly." He nodded,
Sorry.
like that confirmed something. "I figured," he said. "I've passed through a few times. Noticed it's always you." My stomach tightened. That wasn't something a normal customer would say. Still, I laughed it off. Small town, I guess. He tilted his head, eyes scanning the counter. "Meredith, right?" I froze. I wasn't wearing a name tag. The silence between us stretched too long. He followed my glance toward the whiteboard behind me, the one where I'd written "Cinnamon Coffee is back" in big letters. "You have nice handwriting,"
Sir,
he said.
you need to calm down.
"Most people dot their I's with circles. You use slashes.
We're here to help you.
It's very deliberate." The way he said it made my skin crawl. It wasn't a compliment. He was an observation. Practiced, studied. I didn't respond. After another minute of staring, he said softly, "I'm Paul. Just curious, that's all." Then he left. The first night I told myself it was nothing. But then he came back. Not every night, just often enough that I stopped believing it was coincidence. Sometimes he'd come in, buy a water bottle, maybe chips. Sometimes he'd sit in his car at the far end of the lot with his headlights off, facing the building. Once, when I took the trash out, I saw the faint red glow of a cigarette ember near his car window. I went back inside fast and locked the door. One night he came in when I was restocking shelves. "You're quieter tonight," he said. "Long shift," I muttered. He smiled, slow and unhurried,
Emilia.
like he'd been waiting for me to talk. "It must get lonely here," he said. "Just
I
you,
have to breathe.
the humming lights, the empty road. No one else for miles." His tone was calm, conversational. That made it worse. "I'm fine," I said. He leaned forward on the counter, resting his elbows. "Do you ever get scared being alone out here? Being a woman, I mean." My stomach turned. "Do you need anything else?" I asked sharply. He paused, then said, "You always check the back room around 2 a.m. Smart. I noticed that. That's when I knew. This wasn't random. He'd been watching me, memorizing my patterns. When he left, I locked the doors and called the police. They said unless he threatened me, there wasn't much they could do. I started keeping a tire iron under the counter. I changed the curtains in my apartment. I started showering with the bathroom door locked. Every sound outside became a warning. Days passed, then weeks. He didn't show up, and for a while I thought maybe it was over. But then one morning, I came back from my 10-minute break to find a Polaroid on the counter. It was a photo of me from behind the station, refilling the windshield washer bin. It had been taken that night, up close. There was a small red circle drawn around the dot on the I in the word windshield. I felt my knees go weak. The security cameras didn't catch him. He knew where they pointed. When he came back 2 nights later, I told him to leave. My voice shook, but I said it anyway. "If you don't go, I'm calling the police." He just nodded, almost kindly. "I get it," he said. "I've been too forward. You've been following me." I snapped. "That's not paying attention, that's obsession." His eyes softened, as if I'd hurt him. "Would it be easier if I smiled more? If I just bought a soda and talked about sports like everyone else? Would I seem normal then?" His words were too calm, too rehearsed. "I notice things, Meredith, that's all. Most people don't." By then, I was already dialing 911. He didn't stop me. He didn't even move. Just stood there, hands in his pockets, staring while the phone rang. The cops arrived faster than I expected. He didn't resist. They searched his car and found a notebook filled with my name page after page, looping tighter and tighter until it turned into scribbles. He had written down my schedule, what I wore, the brands of groceries I bought. One page said only, "She dots her I's with slashes." He kept repeating to the officers that he wasn't dangerous. "I had just noticed things," he said. "I just care." They took him away, and I watched through the window as the lights from the patrol car faded down the road. The silence that followed was worse than anything he'd ever said. I quit the night shift soon after. The company transferred me to a new station 2 hours away. I told myself I'd feel safe again. But even now, months later, when I drive home and headlights stay behind me too long, my throat closes. When someone says my name in a crowd, I turn around expecting to see his face. And sometimes, I still dream about the way he said. It's at that first night. Slow, deliberate, like he was trying it on for size. Sometimes I wonder if he ever really stopped watching. Because for someone like Paul, noticing things wasn't just a habit. It was an obsession, and I was his favorite detail. I worked the overnight shift at a small gas station on the edge of town. It's the kind of place where the only visitors after midnight are truckers, drunk college kids, or people who don't want to be noticed. I'd only been there 2 months when it happened. I liked the quiet. I liked being alone. Until that night made me realize how easily alone can turn into vulnerable. It was a Thursday, just after 2 in the morning. My coworker Max and his friend Ben stopped by to grab coffee and hang out for a few minutes. They were both high on mushrooms, giggling like idiots, and honestly, I didn't mind the company. The night had been dead, and their energy filled the emptiness. As we were chatting, Ben mentioned something that made my stomach tighten even then, before I understood why. He said there was a car sitting in the far corner of the parking lot. Lights off, engine running, someone inside. He said he'd gone over to ask what the guy was doing, and the man mumbled something about waiting for a DoorDash order. Normally, that wouldn't be weird delivery drivers. Sometimes waited in their cars. But I hadn't had an order in nearly 2 hours. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe I'd missed a notification. But when they went outside to smoke and play with Max's dog, I couldn't stop glancing out the window toward that corner I couldn't quite see from the counter. The building's wall blocked it completely. Whoever was out there could see me, but I couldn't see them. They stayed out there for about an hour. When they came back inside, Max looked uneasy. He said the car never moved. The man just sat there, phone in hand, eyes flicking between them and the store. Sometimes he looks like he was texting someone. "He's watching us," Ben said, and laughed nervously. Max added that when Ben walked up to confront him, the guy pretended not to speak English, then suddenly changed his story and said he had the wrong address. Then he drove off fast. Another car, just as new, no license plates, pulled out right after him. 2 cars, both unmarked, both watching. That detail didn't sit right with me. Brand new cars usually come with temporary plates or dealership tags, but these had none. And the blankets Max described piled in the back seat enough to cover someone made my skin crawl. I thought about how often I went outside alone at night to restock or take the trash out. How easy it would have been for someone to pull up quietly, just out of sight. Max and Ben left around 3:30, telling me to keep an eye out. The store went silent again. Every sound became louder, the hum of the refrigerator, the hiss of the coffee machine, the faint buzz from the overhead lights. At 4 a.m., I stepped outside to smoke and noticed fresh tire marks in that same corner, wet from condensation, like the car had just been there again. I went back inside, locked the doors, and told myself I was overreacting. The night can make anything feel sinister, but when I glanced at the security cameras, the one facing that side of the lot was dead, frozen on an old frame. I hadn't noticed before because it rarely caught movement anyway. I stared at the blank monitor for a long time before finally sitting back down, heart pounding too loud for the silence. The next night, I tried to push it out of my mind, but around 3 in the morning, a group of 4 guys came in for snacks and coffee. They looked tired but friendly truckers maybe, or locals getting off work. As I rang them up, one of them asked casually, "Hey, you know anything about that car parked way out there? Lights off but engines running?" The words hit like a knife twist. I asked what car, pretending to sound calm, but my voice cracked. They described it. New Subaru, dark gray, no plates. 2 men inside, arguing. One of them was pointing toward the station doors. I told them about the night before. The same kind of car, the same pattern. The men exchanged looks, all trace of humor gone. One of them said quietly, "That's not right." They went back outside and lingered by the pumps, watching the car. After a minute or two, the car backed out slowly, then peeled away down the road. The men came back inside and said one of the guys in the car had noticed them staring and freaked out. They offered to hang around until I felt safe. I told them they didn't have to, but they insisted. So, they stayed. We talked idly for about 20 minutes while they sipped coffee and watched through the windows. I felt a little better with them there, but every time the wind rustled the trees or a headlight flashed on the highway, my heart jumped. The second they left, I locked the doors and turned off the lights at the front of the store to see better outside. Nothing happened for the rest of the shift. But I couldn't shake the thought, why park somewhere you can't be seen unless you're trying to hide from someone who's looking? The following night, I came in early, just before midnight. I checked every camera twice. I even parked my car closer to the door.
Back.
The first few hours were calm. Then, around 3, the phone rang. No one spoke. just heavy breathing, faint, slow. I hung up. It rang again. Same thing. The third time, I didn't answer. I just watched the parking lot feed, and there it was. A car idling in the same spot. No plates. Headlights off. I called the non-emergency line again. The operator said they'd send a patrol to swing by. I waited. 10 minutes passed. The car didn't move. Then the lights in the parking lot flickered once, then twice, and the power in the front half of the store went out. The screens went black. The only thing still glowing was the exit sign above the door. My phone flashlight shook in my hand as I backed into the storage room, locking the door behind me. I don't know how long I stood there listening. At one point, I heard footsteps outside, slow and deliberate, crunching the gravel. Then a car door slammed, followed by silence. When the police finally arrived 20 minutes later, the car was gone again. They said they'd patrol the area for a while. There wasn't much else they could do without plates or a solid description. I worked that job for another week, before I asked to switch to daytime shifts. On my last night, I took one final look at that corner of the parking lot before locking up. The asphalt was cracked, littered with leaves, nothing unusual. But when I turned to leave, I noticed something near the dumpster. A small square of paper caught under a rock. I picked it up. It was a photo printed from a phone. Blurry, but it showed the front of the gas station, my silhouette behind the counter. The timestamp read 3:04 a.m. from 2 nights earlier. There was no name, no message. Just that single moment captured from somewhere in the dark by someone who knew exactly where to look. My name is Daniel, and I work the overnight shift at a small rural motel 2 hours outside of town. It's not part of a chain, just a quiet, family-owned place that smells faintly of dust and old coffee. 2 floors, 25 rooms, and most nights, not a single check-in after midnight. That's what I liked about it. I'm not a people person, and sitting alone in the hum of fluorescent lights suited me fine. At least, that's what I thought, until one night changed the way I look at silence forever. It was late fall, a Tuesday, cold enough that the parking lot shimmered with frost. The building creaked as it always did, settling into itself as the temperature dropped. The front door buzzed when someone used a keycard after hours, and a little speaker in the back office dinged when a guest rang the desk bell. I knew every sound by heart. The heater's slow click, the hum of the fridge, the distant groan of pipes expanding. But that night, something new joined the soundtrack. It started around 2 a.m. I was half asleep on the couch in the back office when the bell rang. One sharp, clear ding. I sat up immediately, rubbing my eyes, and walked out to the front desk. The lobby was empty. The lights reflected off the glass doors, and the parking lot beyond was black and still. I waited, but no one appeared. I told myself maybe a guest had leaned on the counter too hard or wind had shaken something. But the bell doesn't ring by accident. I went back to the lounge and sat on the couch, uneasy but trying to ignore it. 10 minutes later, the bell rang again. I was on my feet before it stopped echoing. The lobby was still empty. I checked outside the same parked cars, the same dark road. I even stepped out into the cold and listened, the kind of listening where every tiny sound feels like a threat. There was nothing, just the hiss of the wind against the building. I walked back inside and locked the door behind me. I decided to stay up front this time. I turned down the lobby lights, so they glowed dim, soft enough to see, but not enough to reflect in the glass. I sat in the chair behind the desk, eyes fixed on the small silver bell sitting at the edge of the counter. The longer I stared at it, the louder the silence grew. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, the ticking of the wall clock, the faint hum of electricity through the lights overhead. 15 minutes passed. 20. My body began to relax. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe fatigue was making me hallucinate. Then the bell rang again. The sound was sharp and impossibly close. My eyes went straight to it. That's when I saw the hand. A pale hand human, definitely human, reached up from beneath the desk, fingers curling over the edge, near the counter, and pressed the bell right in front of me. The motion was calm, deliberate, as if whoever it was wanted me to see them do it. I stumbled back so fast the chair nearly fell over. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I bolted down the hall into the back office, slammed the door shut, and locked it. I stood there in the dark, panting, listening. There shouldn't have been enough space under that desk for anyone to fit. I'd cleaned down there before it's cramped, dusty, full of cables and old paperwork boxes. But that hand was real. I'd seen it clearly under the flicker of the lobby light. I forced myself to look at the security monitors mounted on the wall. 4 feeds, 1 for the lobby, 1 for the hallway, 2 for the parking lot. The lobby feed showed the chair tipped over from my rush. The counter was still, the bell unmoved. And then, in the corner of the frame, something shifted. A shape rose slowly from behind the desk. At first, all I saw was the top of a head, then a pair of eyes catching the faint glow of the monitor staring straight into the camera. My breath caught in my throat. I backed away from the screen, terrified to look but unable to stop. I grabbed the phone and dialed 911 with shaking fingers.
Hello, can you hear me?
The dispatcher answered, calm and professional, but my voice was a whisper. "Someone's in the lobby," I said. "They're inside." The dispatcher told me to stay put, to keep the door locked, that officers were on their way. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. The man, or whatever he was, crawled out from behind the desk on his hands and knees, then stood. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie pulled tight around his face. His movements were stiff, jerky, like he hadn't used his legs in a while. He turned slowly in a circle, scanning the empty room, then began walking toward the hallway toward me. The doorknob rattled once. Just once. The sound was almost gentle, like a polite knock from someone who didn't belong. I backed against the wall, phone clutched to my chest, unable to speak. My pulse was roaring in my ears. After a few seconds, the rattling stopped. I could hear soft footsteps moving away, back toward the lobby. The dispatcher was asking if I was safe, but I couldn't answer. My mouth was dry, my body frozen. I turned back to the monitors. The man was standing in front of the glass doors now, motionless, looking outside. A minute passed, then another. He turned toward the brochure rack near the wall, started flipping through pamphlets like a bored guest waiting to check in. The casualness of it was worse than any threat. It felt like he knew the police were coming and didn't care. When the flashing blue and red lights finally appeared on the parking lot feed, I nearly cried. 2 cruisers pulled up. The man didn't run at first. He just stood there, watching the colors flicker across the walls. Then, suddenly, he bolted fast, disappearing out of frame. I heard the front doors bang open. The officers shouted, clearing the lobby. I waited until one of them called out that it was safe before unlocking the office door. They didn't find him. Not in the lobby, not in the hallways, not outside. The front door had been propped open, with a rock from the landscaping. That's how he'd slipped out. The officers checked the cameras themselves, saw what I saw. They said it looked like he'd been hiding for a long time before making a move, maybe waiting for me to fall asleep completely. They told me it was probably just a drifter, someone trying to steal from the register. But thieves don't ring bells. Thieves don't stare into cameras. When they left, I sat in the lobby chair again, the one I'd knocked over earlier. I turned the lights back on full, unable to stand the darkness anymore. Every creak, every hum made me twitch. The bell was still there, shiny and harmless, but I couldn't stop staring at it. The next night, they asked to switch to day shifts. They said they'd find someone else for nights. But even now, sometimes, when the building settles or the phone rings unexpectedly, I swear I can hear it, that single sharp chime echoing through an empty room. And I know, deep down, that whoever was under that desk was never just a stranger passing through. They were waiting for the moment I stopped paying attention. When you work the night shift long enough, you start to notice the patterns, the silence between hours, the way the world seems to hold its breath after midnight. The rest of the world is asleep, but you're still awake, keeping watch. And in that stillness, the line between what's real and what's wrong begins to blur. For the hotel clerk, it was a man who never checked in, who existed only long enough to remind her that safety is an illusion behind locked doors. For Meredith, it was a stranger who paid too much attention, who studied her like she was a puzzle he could solve, until her life stopped feeling like her own. For the gas station worker, it was the cars without plates, silent engines idling in the dark, waiting for the right moment when no one was looking. And for Daniel, it was the hand that rose from beneath the counter, calm and deliberate, as if the darkness itself had decided to say hello. Each story begins the same way, with the ordinary. A quiet night, a familiar place, a routine you've done 100 times before. But that's the thing about fear. It doesn't knock. It just sits and waits for you to notice it's already inside. There's something haunting about the night. It hides what daylight reveals, turns every sound into a question, and every shadow into a possibility. Maybe that's why people like us work these shifts, the loners, the insomniacs, the ones who think we can control what happens when no one else is around. But the truth is, the dark doesn't care if you're paying attention. The moment you stop looking is the moment something else starts watching. If these stories teach us anything, it's this. Trust your instincts. That uneasy feeling in your gut isn't paranoia, it's warning you. Check the locks twice. Listen to the silence. Notice what doesn't fit. Because sometimes, the difference between surviving the night and becoming part of its stories is just 1 second of hesitation. And maybe, just maybe, the next time you hear a noise behind you, or see headlights that follow too long, you'll remember these people, the ones who thought they were safe until they weren't. Because the monsters aren't always hiding under your bed. Sometimes they're standing in the lobby, sitting in a car, or crouching quietly beneath your desk waiting for you to look away. So if you're still awake, still watching, then welcome to Times Midnight, nocturne times where the night shift never ends, and the dark always has a story to tell. Subscribe now, before the lights go out.